Alright guys, we're going to show you how to put a 450R shock on a blaster. And no, that's not the blaster. That's the Quadzilla. All 500 cc's of electric power. But here's the blaster. I've already got the 450R shock put on it. It's not mounted all the way. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get some how-to about how to go about doing the rest of it here before I finish it up. And goddamn, my quad is really dirty right now, so I'm going to clean that today as well. Alright, just to go over some of the basics. Your stock bolt up here that mounts through the shock, it'll go through that hole and the shock mount frame, obviously. This is a 12mm bolt, I believe, and it fits through the shock mount in the stock Yamaha blaster shock, but obviously it does not fit through the Honda 450R shock. It's too big. It's a 10mm bolt. This is just going over basic stuff from Ken O'Connor's video that he made and what a lot of other people have done already. And what I did in place of that is I just bought Ken's bushings and a 10mm bolt from him. He sells them for $25, shipped to your door, so good deal. And he's got the bushings, and I'll go over why the bushings are important when you put this in. The main reason being that it's too wide of a shock mount for this Honda 450R shock, so you're going to have too much play in between here and here. And why is that bad, especially for the 450R shock? Because you have very little room between the shock reservoir and the frame, where the tab on the frame has been grinded off here. It's very little room, especially once it's mounted up, and I'll show you what I mean when I mount it up here. Alright, another thing I want to note is the bottom shock mount. As far as if you haven't done it before and you're just disassembling it, it's pretty easy, at least if you're not stupid like me. The cotter pin on here, you can just cut it off because they're a pain in the ass to get out, and you can get a new one at your local hardware store for 15, 25 cents, nothing. So pop it out, and then this will tap out on the other side. It just taps out. I had to use a little bit of a hammer, and I used an extra socket or a punch. You can just knock it out there. Sometimes they get a little tough because they get dirty here in between where the shock sits. Now for this bottom shock mount, it is too small. Honda OEM bolt is a sorry about that, is too small. You have to drill it out in order to make this stock pin work and fit into the shock mount. Ken calls for a 12mm drill bit. That is the correct bit to use, but 12mm drill bits are hard to come by unless you pick them up online. So I used a 15/32 bit, which is a little smaller, but it worked for me. It fit through kind of tight, but it fits through and it slides perfectly fine. I don't have any issues with it moving or anything like that. So that works alright. You can pick that up. That was about $8, no big deal. Alright, one annoying thing I tend to hear a lot is people say, well, the stock Yamaha blaster bolt will slide through if you take the brass ring that fits into the shock, the top of the shock body, if you take it out. It's slid in there, and if you take it out, this will slide through and fit. First of all, there's a lot of problems with this. There's too much play in here. If you can see that, there's entirely too much play. You can see right through it. The other problem is you have needle bearings in there that you have to lube up, and when you do this, on top of having play, you can damage these needle bearings, and they can pinch the stock shock and start eating through it and cause even more play. This is a just common sense problem that you don't want to rig it up to just so it's fabbed up and it's just on there. You want to make it so it actually functions properly. So just do yourself a favor and get a 10mm bolt, or buy one from Ken when you get the bushings. You pop that in there after you lube it up, then you can mount it on your frame there. So just do it the proper way, don't do anything dumb like that. I know a couple people have done that, and I expect some catastrophic results from doing so. So unless you want a shock right up your ass, I wouldn't suggest doing it. Alright, well, this part I'm just going to make a point here as to why it's absolutely critical to have some type of bushings. Even if you don't get Ken's bushings, which is the ideal selection because he makes bushings for you cheap and you can just purchase them, to at least put spacing between here. Because if you have that much play between this and this shock, and you end up with hitting this frame here, as I will illustrate, even with that tab grinded off, you're going to hit this frame. So what's going to happen is this shock's going to compress, and this reservoir is going to want to go down. If you land on a big jump and this comes over all the way and then ends up underneath the frame, you're going to end up hitting the frame, either breaking the reservoir or bending the frame, or both. A very, very bad situation. So, solution is to put Ken's bushings in. Alright, we're going to go over some of the stuff here since I got the plastic back on, and we're going to show you some of the fitments of the shock onto the frame with the plastic on, and some of the problems you're going to run into. But before I get there, I'm going to go over that tab I was talking about on the frame before. This tab right here, you can see where it was. I grinded it down. I just took a Dremel. You can use whatever works. I mean, whatever gets it off. You want to watch the frame though, obviously. Do not want to take any part of the frame out because you're going to weaken the frame, obviously. But there's a tab here, when you look on here, that holds that plastic. I just took it, grinded it off, and then kind of finished it some more just to play it safe, so you get that little bit of gap in between the shock and the frame. It's the same tab that you have over on the other side of your airbox there. As you can see here, it's still there, and then over here I took it off. The other thing is, your plastic also has that tab, so you got to take that tab off too. Scrap. But you have some other fitment issues with this, especially if you're on a stock airbox, which I am promptly changing out here. I'm actually making my own. What you can see is that this shock reservoir, it's either really close or touching the plastic here for the stock airbox. It's so close that, I mean, when it squats a little, it's going to rub it a little bit. Not a major issue, but something you want to address. So what I'm going to do here in the future, either later today or tomorrow, is I'm just going to take a Dremel and just clean it up a little bit. I don't think it actually affects the sealing on the stock airbox lid if you're running that, but you can check that as you go, and if you do, you can always put some silicone sealant or anything that'll just close that up so it's airtight if you're going through a lot of mud and stuff. So you're going to want to try to get that to go back so it's not rubbing on there on that shock. The other thing is on the stock airbox, this brass I should say, whatever, the sleeve for the threads for the bolt, you want to make sure that it's either grinded off so it's not hitting the shock reservoir, which I've already done, as you can see for the melted plastic here, or just cut it off altogether, which is what I'm going to do here because I'm going to make that own airbox like I was saying. So you want to watch this because that will grind on the reservoir, and this is metal, so it could have a possibility of wearing through the reservoir. You want to watch that. So as far as the finished product of what we got here, I measured the seat height from my own point here on the back. I didn't go by Yamaha spec seat height. I don't know where they measure from. I don't know if it's measured from the tip here or what, and I got a seat cover on anyway, so I just measured from this little bracket on the rear here. The Stock Blaster shock gave me 28 inches of height from the ground there, and with my setup, everybody's setup's a little different depending on what tires, how much you're squatting and everything. With it just sitting static like this with no rider, I had it 28 inches. Now when I put the 450R shock on, and I got most of the settings in the middle with the rebound, compression, and the preload, it's right about 27 1/4. So it rides about 3/4 of an inch lower in the rear now with that 450R shock. Some of the initial things on it, it is softer. I can't really give a real accurate description of how well it's riding yet, because I got kind of a small yard. I don't really have and it's really snowy, and all that snow melt from the winters coming here, so it's kind of a bitch to get it out and take it out for a great test. But going out, you can tell it's definitely a lot better shock, and I'll have to play with the settings on it to actually get it tuned into my weight and everything, as far as the compression and rebound and what I like for my type of riding. But initial impressions, it's a lot better than the Blaster Shock. Blaster Shock to me is a real big pogo stick. It's not adjustable, and it tends to get bumpy. This absorbs a lot of the impacts that you're going to have with most of the riding you're going to have with it. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. I can always post another vid, or just answer some of the comments you got in the bottom. And special thanks to everybody at blasterforum.com. So if you guys got any questions with them, just go to the forums, sign up, and ask some questions there if you got a Blaster. And like I said before, the bushings you can get from KenO'ConnorRacing.com.